Welcome to the Shit Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name's David Coe.
Bottom left today, you have me, Richard Basolato. Welcome.
And my name is Joe Augustin. And as the rest of our streams catch up, you might be joining us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you might be. Welcome to the show that we named by looking around us and saying, yep, this looks like what it is. So we called it The Shit Show. It is a show that tries to untangle the polycrisis, which means that we are trying to make sense of the world if you try to consume all the news in the world. And I usually don't do this at the beginning, so I'm going to do this right now. If you don't mind, why don't you do this? Like and share this content, right? Take a chance on us. It might be something that you enjoy. If you do, keep it there. If you don't, take it back. It's fine. We also try to get ourselves a diverse perspective on the stuff we're talking about. So we bring on our guests as well. And today we're delighted to welcome Joseph Masembe, who hails from Uganda. He's the CEO and founder of Little Hands Go Green, as well as the Regional Director of Climate Change Advocacy East Africa. Joseph, or Joe, depending on how much trouble he's in with his mom, is a passionate advocate for our children's future, launching Little Hands Go Green in 2012. As a civil society organization. Its goal is to nurture and empower children as the main drivers of environmental conservation, education in schools, homes, and communities. He brings worldwide view to this conversation, so we're glad to have him on board today. Welcome, Joseph.
Well, good morning from this end. It's good to be on the shit show. Feels like a little bit like shit, but yeah, it's all right. Glad to be here in company of all you distinguished gentlemen and the lady.
It's good to have you, Joseph. So I met Joseph on a Saturday night group that I'm part of, which is called the Climate Crisis Club. And he always really, really impresses me with the way he speaks. So, yeah, just give us a bit more background on you, maybe before you became an environmentalist.
Well, what can I say? Joseph Masembe is my name. And even before I became an environmentalist, I've always been passionate about children and their well-being. I think the child in me is still hiding somewhere in there. But I'm a lawyer. I'm a trained lawyer by profession. I haven't practiced. I read law at Kingston University in London. I've done marketing. And I think one of the things why I actually switched into environmental conservation was because as a marketeer, I have seen all these campaigns that everybody does worldwide. Everybody wants to plant trees. Everyone wants to do reforestation and the like. But how can I put it? We do it sometimes for the cameras. Sometimes we do it without passion. We do it because it ticks certain boxes. So when I woke up one day, I looked at how the world was going and what stake those that we call children, the ones who will own the future when we are long gone. And I thought, what stake do they have in helping to create the kind of future that they will inherit? So I thought, without doing it the political way or the marketing way, let's try and see if we can get every child. And at the time I was in Uganda after having done my law degree, and there was an economic crisis all over the world, Europe, the Americas, 2008, 2009, 2010. So when everything was not so clear, I was looking for a direction. I came and started doing a couple of marketing projects, a bit of business consultancy in Uganda, in Kenya, moving up and down, trying to find my edge. And then in one of those sojourns, I discovered something called fun and entertainment for children. Everybody was doing a brilliant show somewhere, Lionel Richie somewhere, I don't know, a concert in Brazil. And there was, I think, a concert I watched one time. I think it was I watched it on TV, Hyde Park. It was for Nelson Mandela. And it had all these artists that came to celebrate, I think, his 90th birthday somewhere. So I thought to myself, but I haven't seen one of these for the children. So initially, my goal was not to become an environmentalist. It was to sort of create a Disney-like feel for children in Africa. So it was something called My Kid is a Superstar, where everybody can recognize the talent and the innocence and the good in children. But when we gathered all these children in 2011, there was about 10,000 of them to play on bouncing castles and jump on whatever they call them, rides and trampolines. I thought to myself, we can do more with these children. So I said, why don't we create a project to enable every child to go home and plant at least just one fruit tree? And the logic was very simple. I mean, if I plant a fruit tree, I will get vitamins from the fruits. I will get better health effects. I will also get excited watching a tree bear fruit, because I remember growing up getting excited watching a bean germinate in a science project. Mm-hmm. So we started this little thing with a couple of volunteers, say the little ones go green. And it started like a little joke. And they wrote an article in the newspaper. It was on the 2nd of April, 2012, in the Monitor newspaper. And it said, our little ones go green. And I sat with this reporter who I just told this dream scenario of mine. If every child plants a tree, there's about 20 million children in Uganda at the time, have 20 million trees easy, which will have contributed to the green footprint. So it sounded like an exciting thing. Now, interestingly so, and it's even weird that a few days ago I met this gentleman who in 2012 read the article, and he traveled all the way from the West Nile region of Uganda. He asked for my number from the reporters. They got to me. He came and we had a coffee, and he told me, my name is John Orach from the Elderly Members Association, Akopa in Yumbe district. It's in West Nile in Uganda. And he said to me that I am here to request you on behalf of my community to please give us tree seedlings. Now, in my mind, I was trying to remember if the article mentioned that I was a custodian of all these trees or the head of the National Forestry Authority, whatever it was. But it didn't. And he had a declaration signed by 25 families promising that they will protect these trees. And in his argument, he said, if you give us, our area is rich in growing mangoes and avocado, but we grow them in silos. So if we can plant as a community and harvest as a community, then we'll get better finances from our yields. Then he also asked me for avocado seedlings because he didn't want their children and grandchildren to grow up malnourished. And then the third one was acacia tree seedlings because he said the area was very rich in beekeeping, which it is. The tree species is good for beekeeping. Anyway, long story short, I promised the gentleman to go and visit him and see the place. And 2-3 days later, I found myself in a car headed towards the West Nile, which is over 600 kilometers away. But what transformed me into an environmentalist was the reception that I got. Now, I am as simple as they come. Half the times I am in jeans and a t-shirt. I wore this coat purposely for this one. I wear it for interviews. But he ushered me into a room where the entire district leadership was waiting. And these kind of speeches that they make, say, we'll invite Joe, to invite Peter, to invite John, to invite Jen, to eventually invite our guest. So I thought to myself, come on, I am not that. But it showed me the belief in the simple idea of getting a child to plant and own a tree. So what I thought was something very small was being received with a lot of magnitude and belief. So as the story unfolded, we planted trees. I bumped into him 2 days ago accidentally. He must be like now 85 years old. And he told me that the trees have grown. They have eaten mangoes, they have eaten guavas, they are tired of the fruits, they're enjoying them. But that was the transformation into what became Little Ones Go Green. And when we started off then, we went knocking on doors of schools saying, listen, can we plant a symbolic tree in your school? And they say, yeah, come on. Can we plant a symbolic tree? As the years grew by, they said, the tree you planted grew, but can we now have 7 trees each for the primary 1, primary 2, up to primary 7? Then others started, we have a little bit more space. Can we plant a mini orchard? And the excitement grew, and it grew, and it grew. And for me, it is I met at the time, there was a gentleman who I think was the head of the National Forestry Authority. And he told me, why don't you find some big piece of land and then you plant one big forest? And I told him, I'm not interested in planting a forest because there are so many other forests. I want mindset change. Let us try and create little forests in little mines in so many different compounds and communities, because that is when we'll have a springhold of a unifying effect of a greener footprint and cover. But then it's not just planting, it's putting a tree in the ground in my compound, and I am busy throughout the day and the night. And then after a few years, I am eating fruit from that very tree. And that is in one home, in one school, in one community. And that has been the journey. It's amazing what it has been able to achieve. We're in Rwanda, we did the same. We tried to do it in Kenya, Tanzania, all over the place. Even try to do it in America, in Germany. Wherever we walk, we have the disciples or the ambassadors who go and preach that green gospel and try and replicate it across the board. So in a nutshell, that is myself, the Little Ones Go Green philosophy. And our vision and the mission is very simple. Can we get children to be in charge of the future they will inherit? Can they be the custodians of their tomorrow? The ancient Americans have a saying that we do not inherit this land or from our from ancestors. We simply borrow it from our children, because as soon as you work so hard, you get a mortgage, you get a house, and then boom, you go 6 foot under, and then your son takes over. And then he takes care of that, and then boom, he goes 6 feet under, and his son takes over. So it is not really ours. It's not from our ancestors. It is, we are just being custodians of it for our children. So let's help to raise a generation of children that will become more responsible citizens in the face of the climate crisis, which is crazy right now. And I know we live in a world where we have so many people who deny the climate crisis. They have lots of figures and thoughts about it, which is okay. It is their prerogative. But I say, let's move away from the science of denial. Let's move away from the science of acceptability and go to a basic humanity. Basic humanity. We're human beings. What would you rather have? Floods and droughts or a green place? Would you rather have people dying of malnutrition, disease, waste, or would you rather have them live happy, healthy, and breathing better air? So for me, the rationale is not about the science. It's not about what we believe. It is just about what is right. I'm a Christian, and in Genesis. God, in his infinite wisdom, woke up one day and thought, God, it's lonely out here. And he looked at himself up there, sipping on his coffee and everything. And, he was lonely. So he decided to create the earth. And he actually took his time. He put 5 whole days in putting together the rivers, the seas, the mountains, the beauty of that. And he looked and said, yeah, I've done a good job. Then he said, something is lacking. Something is lacking. So he thought to himself, who can help drive dominion over this, pamper this, nurture it, and replenish it? So he created man in just one day. And man goes on and destroys what God spent 5 whole days putting together. He destroys in just one day. Flick of a finger, dump of rubbish, etc. So that is the Christian side of it. In Islam, for the Muslims, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, says in one of his many hadiths that if you are about to draw your last breath and you're holding a tree sapling in your hand, gather all your strength and first put it in the ground, then you can go. He also goes on to say that when man dies, everything he has done in life vanishes, except three things. And the first one, which is the most important one, is called Sadaka Tulijalia, which refers to those ceaseless acts of charity that you have done that can stay on long after you've gone, like putting up a well, because people will always get water from that well even when you're long gone, or planting a tree, because people will always either stand in a shed under the tree or actually eat fruit from that tree, or even make pencils from that tree or chairs. So whether it is religion, whether it is humanity, whether it is our faith, we are called upon to take better care of our environment. And that, in essence, is the little Hands Go Green story, belief, vision, and mission.
No.
I will take a gentle pause because I need a coffee.
I love
No,
it. It's
yeah,
a
it's
fabulous
beautiful.
story. Yeah, and yeah, what you're describing sits very, very close to me. You know, to me, it's actually something even bigger than a religious aspiration. It's got to do with an overarching moral sense of responsibility. There is some kind of moral compass that the vast majority of us all possess. There are actually frighteningly few people who don't, thank God. That regardless of what your other views are, there is an inner sense of what is actually the right thing to do for the vast majority.
Yeah. So I was just going to continue with the little Hands Go Green, just to sort of talk more about the organization, because you've planted nearly 900,000 trees through this organization, right? That's just phenomenal. I'm going to share a little bit more about, the day-to-day, I suppose.
So what Little Ones Go Green has managed to do is to understand the ecosystem of a child. A child lives in a home with either mommy, daddy, there's an auntie, maybe an uncle, a sibling, big brother. Then they go to a school where they have teachers, caretakers, and the rest. Then they probably go to a church where they have a pastor or a reverend or a priest and a sister and a nun, whatever it is. Those that go to the Muslim have an imam, EDC to the mosque, that kind of thing. So what we have tried to do is to preach this green gospel and impart it to the children. So when we do these green festivals, which we do annually, we make sure every child can take home one fruit tree. That's the first one. So they go and plant it. Then sometimes we find that they are anecdotal days, or like Day of the African Child or World Environment Day. And then we say, okay, it is going to be, if we are in Rwanda, let us go to Kigali and find a place with a school in Chibagabaga, and then we plant 300 fruit trees. And we lobby for people. We don't have these trees. We have a few nurseries, yes, but people give us these trees. We go and say, listen, we need some trees. Can we go and do this? I tell a very good story about the sense of purpose and God's divine nature in this. And I give an example of the year 2015. In 2015, I went to the Seedling Center of the National Forestry Authority and had a document saying they should give me seedlings. And the range master there said, I can only give you 6,000 lemon seedlings. And I started arguing. I said, listen, this is an annual event. You are partners. You can't give me only lemons. I need mangoes. I need avocado. I need a variety. What are the children going to do with lemons, honestly? I mean, lemons. So I made a spirited case, but the man said, there is nothing I can do. That is all I have. So I reluctantly picked up these 6,000 seedlings, took them to the Green Festival in Kololo, and gave them out. And they disappeared. And I forgot about that, in my mind, unfortunate episode. Now, 5 years later, in March 2020, the world got shut down by COVID. And one of the only key miraculous things that managed to get us through COVID were lemons. Because I don't know how it was that way, but everywhere I was saying you take a little bit of ginger and lemon and garlic, and ginger, lemon, garlic, lemon. Then people started saying, thank you so much. Oh my God, the lemon tree. Oh my God, oh my God. Then I said, oh my God. It actually makes it like God in his infinite wisdom knew that 5 years later there's going to be a pandemic. Better get people to start planting lemons. And we survived on that. There are schools you walk to, or sometimes you meet a child and they hug you, and then you ask, so do I? They say, no, like you gave me a tree and then I planted. Then when I was 8 years, I planted 8 other trees. And so before you know it, you have little pockets of people that over the past 12 years have made it their mission to plant and own a fruit tree. And for us, we don't do eucalyptus. We don't do all these funny other trees. It has to be a fruit tree. Where it is not a fruit tree, maybe a medicinal, but mostly fruit trees. And just to show why the movement has grown and we have managed to plant those trees is because a wise Englishman once told us that all work without play makes Jack a dull boy. So we say the approach to conservation is going to be blend fun and entertainment into conservation. So when children come to a green festival, they know, oh, we are going to jump on the bouncing castles, we are going to have fun, we are going to model, we're going to sing, we're going to dance, but we must be green. We must play, take care of the environment. If you see in my background here, I threw this on my wall because some children have little pledge cards. So many that when you go to a school, they put them and say, I promise I will never litter. I promise I will never do this. So it started from planting trees to lobbying companies and organizations, like there's one called Harris International, to give us barrels that we turn into litter bins. So then we now distribute litter bins to schools to show them by example that, first of all, let's start by putting all our litter in the bins. Then later on, we now start, if you have enough bins, let us now separate our litter. What can be composite, that can go back into the ground because it produces manure. And then the plastics go here, and then the other rubbish goes here, and then the recyclables go here. But it is a carefully crafted conversation with children, by children, driven by children. So we have so many, almost over 1 million green ambassadors scattered across East Africa, Uganda, Rwanda. And to be a green ambassador, you just need to pledge. I pledge, I will take care of my environment. I swear I will not litter, I'll plant trees, I will not let anybody destroy the grass, in their own childhood way. And that's it. And then they go. And then they carry on. And I will take a vocal pause.
No, sorry.
I was just observing for everyone who's used to this show taking its usual course that we've gone in about 20, 23 minutes into it. And we're in danger of sounding very positive. we usually get into stuff which is it's all coming up a bit later on in the show, but so far this has been very, very much a story of ultimate positivity.
I can throw spanners into this.
When it comes to activists as well, it sounds like such a healthier way to approach things, and it's a lighter touch really in terms of just doing the thing, right? It's not the whole story. You're not trying to get people to swallow the whole story. You're just saying let's get involved with these smaller activity first. Let's do something small, symbolic, that's meaningful, and it's amazing to watch.
Yeah,
I mean, Joe, I know, Joe, you've said something of we sound too positive, but the reality of the situation is this. If we are now on the shit show, if you got a call right now or a message that just came in and said, there's something wrong with your son at school, immediately you just get off the show and you run and go deal with that. If it is something to do with your 25-year-old son or 32-year-old son, you'd ask, okay, let me get back to you in 20 minutes. Let me just finish the show, then I come. Because you believe that's an adult. So, you can get to that. But when people mention children and their innocence, everybody lends an ear. Everybody wants to be part of their better development. And I will tell you, I don't really like to do this, but I'll just mention it. The America now is pulling out of the Paris Agreement. The administration doesn't largely believe in climate change, which is okay for them. But for a long time, this was the standpoint of America. America had refused to ratify the Kyoto Protocol, the Bali Conference, all of these things. They refused to be a part of that conversation until there was a hurricane, I forget its name, that came and shut down Wall Street for 4 days. Then they said, wait a second, I think let's start to listen to this conversation. Then they came back into the picture. After that hurricane, the floods and the hurricanes have been happening over the years. They used to happen every 100 years, every 20 years, every 50 years, every 10 or so years. But now, they literally come almost every other 5 days, there's a hurricane. And we have gotten now so used to them, which is sad, that we now give them the names we give to our dear children. Oh, Hurricane Isaac, oh, Joshua, oh, Katrina, because we have sadly accepted that they are part of the status quo. They are part of our everyday lives, which I think is sad, because what kind of inheritance are we going to give our children? At a certain point, I think it was in 2021, there were floods that ravaged the whole of Europe. I mean, Germany, Turkey, Istanbul, and that kind of thing. The wildfires used to be something that used to threaten the kangaroos in Australia. Then boom, LA, Hollywood, bam, fires. So the things that we thought were distant are moving a lot closer. And it is time to wake up and smell the coffee. And like I said at the start of this show, you don't have to do it because you believe in the science. Just do it for basic humanity, or if even basic common sense. I mean, it either makes sense not to litter. That's not about science. And people think that climate change is one whole big football that they just dump on you. No, it builds up over time. The effects come a lot later. Look at the air we breathe now. Literally almost every 5 children, one is walking with an inhaler. Every 5 children, one is walking with an inhaler. I mean, if you look at our version of pollution, you think if the air is going to be polluted, I need to look up in the sky and it will be dark black. Then I know, oh, there is pollution. No, it simmers through. Look at the microplastics that we have. When you open a bottle, even the bottle tops, the minute pieces of plastic or metal or whatever it is that slip through, things that you will not see with an open eye, microscopic. They go into our drinks. We take them, we consume them, we get sicker. We need to revisit our approach to the life we have and the one that we want our children to inherit. So I think for me, it is. I told Andrea the other day that we need to think local actions with a global vision. Something that we do today may help to reduce an effect, or may provide a positive lesson for people in Singapore, may provide a positive lesson for people in America, in Canada, in Guatemala. I told someone the other day about the small island states. There are states that are literally in the next 5 years may face extinction because of the rising sea levels. And boom, they will get submerged. And it may be a country with just 50,000 people, but it is still a country with a human population that actually matters. So let's think outside the box, but most importantly, let's start by thinking the way they say charity begins at home. Let's just start with the basics. And that one, whether the deniers are there, whether they don't believe, it will make a small difference. And I think Saint Mother Teresa once said that we may not all do great things in life, but we can do small things with great love. So if we can use that as a guiding principle, then hopefully the outlook of our planet may be a little bit different for the future generations.
Yeah. So, growing up in Australia, it's a hot country, just like Africa's hot, right? But our summer times we're outdoors running around as a Gen X. Come home when the lights go on at night on the street, that sort of thing. Nobody was watching us. The parents were working. We just did whatever the hell we want, and our creeks were clean, our rivers were clean, and the oceans were clean. And so every time I hear about people who are fighting against change, I just keep thinking back to my children have never seen what I've seen. They didn't grow up being able to have an outdoor life, especially in the summer, because it's just too hot. Playgrounds, you burn your hands if you touch the equipment, and all over the world it's different for the kids in Phoenix over the summertime in the US. The temperature on the ground is like 180 degrees. It's just crazy. So I just wanted you to elaborate on the global perspective on this, because I think you've got a really great way of sort of positioning it, because you're not just looking at Uganda and you're not just making an impact there, you're making it right across East Africa, but it's more than that. Do you want to talk about, to the parents of the world,
I think
give them some hope.
I think, like you've said, globally, you see, we have got the global north and the global south. And people in the global south pollute the least. But they suffer the biggest brunt of the effects of climate change. And sometimes in the global north, we tend to think, people say, that's, it's okay. I mean, I take out my trash, I separate my litter, my recyclables go out on Tuesday, and then the other ones go out the week after, so I am good. But there is nothing like good. Like if a fruit gets rotten on one side, the other side cannot be comfortable that, we're good. Mine is still fresh, because it will eventually eat across. Now, in the global north, I'll give you an example. We have what they call the Conference of Parties, the COP meetings that happen every year. And this year it is going to happen in Brazil, in Belém, in November. And when you go on, the government of Brazil has kind of made it literally impossible for very many people to be able to travel, because I think the average cheapest accommodation for a delegate going to Brazil is somewhere in the region of $270 to $300 a night. Now, how then can you go and have a meaningful conversation or discussion on the state of our climate when you're just going to be able to bring in just a few select people? How will people from Bangladesh, from Uganda, from Guatemala, from India, from wherever, come and sit in a 2-week conference where, first of all, they're going to spend a lot of money on accommodation, then the tickets, then there is survival and food and all that. It begs the question of, are we really looking for a solution?
Yeah.
And that is why, to me, I think it is very important for us to remind ourselves that individuals, private citizenry, can sometimes take on the challenges that we face as humanity without having to exclusively wait on and rely on global governments and global institutions to take the lead. That's why I say charity begins at home. So if you are in Germany or in Australia, wherever you are, whether it is a potted plant, whether it is recycling, you do your little bit within your means to make a difference for your children, your household, and the kind of inheritance they will have. Because there's an African saying that says, a wise old man plants a tree whose shade he knows he will never sit under. So that one would apply, whether you are in Africa or in India or in South America or wherever it is. We have to give hope, because that is the least that we can do. In a country like that big one where there is no belief in climate change, there is a pull out from the processes. You look at the humanitarian aid that has been cut off by trillions, the people that are suffering from malaria, from the effects of, I won't call it I try to stay clear of politics, but we are not going to dampen their spirits. Let's see how we can, as a human race, collectively try to do the few things within our means, the little things within our means. Like I've said, I gave an example earlier on where we have been taking some dustbins to schools. Now, in a better scenario, you would have taken them a blue one and a green one to be able to separate what is recyclable and what's not. But at least you can start from somewhere and say, rather than leave it all over the ground, let's put it in these dustbins. And the key thing is the lesson. Now, globally, most of the countries in the global north that have spent so many years polluting are pushing for an agenda of keeping fossil fuels in the ground, which is a very good thing at the moment. But you have countries that have just discovered oil, and in their view, they're saying this is the answer to our problems. We're going to sort out all our economic mess. We are going to pay our debts. We are going to improve the GDP of our countries. So how do you strike the balance? I've sat in meetings and I've had people talk about just transition. We need a just transition from the renewable energies. And I say, just transition is relative. A just transition in Southern Sudan is not the same as a just transition in Germany or in Italy or in India or in Pakistan, where people have, in certain countries, we say, okay, let's now focus on solar energy or nuclear energy, because you can afford to do that. You can afford to have electric cars. So you can't have a uniform just transition across the board. I'll give you an example. In one of the northern parts of Uganda, it produces the best charcoal that they use to cook, because they get it from trees that are with hard oak that will endure. So it has a good quality, the burning and everything. Now, you find a gentleman that has been in the charcoal business of actually cutting trees and burning charcoal for 30 years. He has educated his children, raised families. He's probably Muslim, he's a Hajj, and he has 3 wives. And all of them, the children go to school, they have a well-being because of that business. Then there is another guy who transports the charcoal from 600 kilometers away and brings it into the city for sale and consumption. His name is Juma. And Juma has 2 wives as well. He has children that have gone to university, and he has educated them on this kind of business. Then there's a lady in the market who actually sells the charcoal. She has 8 children from 3 husbands, and all of them are in school. She has managed to put up a little house. You know, she's progressively moving because of this charcoal business. Then you come and say, listen, stop the charcoal. Charcoal burning is not good. It's bad for our trees. Let's go to briquettes. Now, how do you cater for that entire value chain, that the entire route from the person who cuts, the ones who burn, the ones who smell the charcoal, the ones who load it on the truck, the people ferry it to the cities, and the actual ones who consume it? So if you are doing a just transition, how do you cater for that entire line of people? So that's why I say we need to rethink some of the things we bring in as solutions, because we need to ensure at the end of the day that you have resilient, sustainable communities. And to be able to do that is how do I move you from the charcoal business, keep your family and children safe, they can eat, they can drink, they can go to school, and then also be able to balance the provision of taking care of the environment. I used to tell some policy makers that, you know what, people cut timber and then they transport it. Before you give anyone a license, can they show you a lot that they have planted? Because you know they are going to fell timber, but at least let them plant before you give them a license to do timber for furniture or for whatever cause it is. But that's a discussion that is a little bit broader. So I know when I talk about this, I could sometimes wander on, but we have to think what works for us in our localities, in our small places, whether it is in Brisbane, whether it is in Peru, whether it is in Milan or in Addis Ababa. What could work for me that will make an impact on the environment for me, for my children, and for future generations to come, and also keep the economy in check wherever you can. So how do we balance the need for economic development with raising sustainable, resilient communities, as well as taking care of the environment and climate change in general? So yeah. That's it.
I'm going to ask. I know that David will want to jump in, so I'm just going to bring him over.
I don't know if I should. I think if I just, I mean, I just want to say, by the way, that I had a trouble connecting to the website littlehandsgogreen.org.
Okay.
So
okay.
I got on it, and then the next time it denied me access, so I don't know what was going on.
So that's a good point, and I think it'd be great to be able to have a connection, a contact.
Yeah.
I found that you're on formerly Twitter. I don't really want to say, but anyway, that's just me.
Now I will share that, and also there's a YouTube channel, called Little Ones Go Green. So, but it's the disparity of internet and its connectivity down this way. So
and I want to put one thing kind of across it in this way. I think this is an important thing. I think that there's conventional thinking, conventional wisdom about just how progress is made and all those things. And what you're talking about is to say, let's take off that jacket of conventional wisdom in that way. In fact, what you're saying is, under this jacket of conventional wisdom, we already have a better jacket. And we just covered it up in that way. And that's really important, because yesterday a report came out. A report came out by BP, which is a oil and gas company, and is this Energy Outlook 2025. And in it pulled back on a anticipation last year out of its economic models of a peak to oil and gas use. And it said that's not going to happen. And the reason it said it's not going to happen is because of development in Africa, in emerging Asia, and those countries. And clearly you alluded to the countries which are discovering new sources of oil and gas in what you were talking about. But the reason it was making those comments is because there is a conventional wisdom, this jacket that we wear, about how development must go. And I was in Kenya a year and a half ago, and there the development is all about increasing the pollution in the cities, getting more traffic jams, creating more dust along in that way. And that's the image of development. If you're doing those things, then you are developing. And there's
very true, by the way.
It's not by accident. It's because there's a huge industry behind it from the wealthier countries, that they want new places where they can apply the development techniques they have had, because that's how they're geared up towards. And this is a huge opportunity. There is 1.5 billion people on the African continent that they can apply that to. And if they do that, they can continue on to maintain their position. So I think what I want to bring along is, I love this idea. And I think really important to that is this aspect that you suggest, which is don't prejudge the actions you might take as to what it may mean. There is a big mentality change, which is to take off this jacket of conventional wisdom, allow the older jacket, which is actually a better one, to come through, and actually really rethink what it means to be living in a better world for you. And I think that's an important start in that way. So I really love to connect with you. I've got a few ideas I really want to see. I had a book called A Book of Trees. And the idea of a book of trees is not to list the trees, is to list the stories of each tree. So
thank you.
All the people there in your children, that they can each write a page with their tree and their stories.
And David, allow me just to interject. You see, what you have said there is, how can I put it? That there is the nail on the head. I mentioned to you, and I'm going to put it in the comments after this call. I'm going to put 2 pictures of the gentleman who came to see me when he came to see me when I was starting Little Ones Go in 2012. And I met him 3 days ago wearing a yellow shirt, campaigning for the president. There was a president's nomination, the president that's coming on, President Yoweri Museveni. And I looked at him and I said, oh my God, you're still alive. We bumped into each other on the street and we laughed and hugged and we took a picture and I saved it. But the point that I wanted to make, which brings in the issue you talked of the story, when we were going to launch Little Ones Go Green, we met a lady giving birth at the roadside. Now, she was 10 kilometers away from the nearest health center and her waters broke. I think I have an amateur video as well. I'll find it and then I'll throw it in as well. I will give it to Andrea and then you can push it out just as a follow-up. But when he mentioned those stories and the trees and what they mean, and this lady, where we parked our cars, we're shocked, we saw people gathering, and she didn't ask us for a t-shirt or money or anything. Like they normally, when you see people from uptown, you ask them for something, or a little money or biscuits or sweets. And she just asked to plant a tree at the spot where she had given birth, so she would forever remember where her child was born. And so I asked him, how is that lady? He told me the child must be about 13 years old. So you can imagine, it was 2012. It's now 2025. The child is about 13 years old, but there is that spot where they gave birth from. So for me, every other story, and when I sometimes drive, I went to Rwanda the other day, and I said I want to go and check on my. Say you can't go to that place now. The first family now lives in that area and it has security. I said I don't give a rat's ass. So I went to the gates and said, listen, I want to enter there. I said, why? I said, see those trees there? I planted them here in 2017. So, and I said, they called whoever, and then I walked in and I saw the trees and the excitement, because the trees have a story. I mean, I know what happened in 2017. I have little kids' pictures somewhere scattered of children they would put paint in a basin, then they put it on a tarpaulin, and then they put their thumbprints, and then they write on their names. Now, I can travel across the world in so many places, and I tell you stories of, there is a potted plant that I put in Oregon when I had gone for public interest environmental law conference in 2015. Or there is this in Toronto, or there is this in Rwanda, or this in Ghana. So every tree has a story. And that's not just for me alone. Even the children, you meet a parent who is so excited. And I'll tell you this, when we're doing 10 years of Little Ones Go Green in 2022, I went to a gentleman who, at the time, I had coffee with him. And at the time, he was the managing director of the electricity, distribution company. It was called Umen. So whispered, I told him, you know what, we are doing 10 years and would really, really need a little bit of your support. So So we can have a small function, at least for a few ambassadors. He called his head of public relations and said, "Can you prepare at least 10 million shillings for these guys?" The guy said, "I don't have a budget, but I can give 5 million." Said, "Okay, prepare the check. They will give it." I told him, "Oh my God, I am so happy. It's my lucky day." He told me, "No, it's not." He told me in 2015 I walked to your function and I picked up 2 lemon seedlings and I planted them, and the doctors told me to stay off milk. I survive on lemon tea, and I survive on the lemons from the trees you gave me. Now that's testimony. It was accidental, but it's so those little stories, and I like what David said. It's you attach a conversation to vocal pause now.
So
Oh, I was just like, keep going. I think you need to read a book. You need to write a book about trees, like David was saying. But okay, if you're ready to talk again. So what I wanted to do is, because there's a lot of people who are here who don't really know what's going on in Africa, and there's a lot of things, and it's a massive continent, and we've got extreme droughts in one end, we've got terrible famines, we've got floods, we've got there's some terrible stuff going on. So I just wanted to get a sense. You're on the front line of climate change. What are you seeing? What's some of the worst you're seeing? What are some of the stupid decisions that are being made that are having an impact, like building in wetlands? Give us that perspective.
You see, and I think that is, I alluded to that earlier on when I said, how do you strike a balance between economic development, sustainability, and protection of the environment? Now, you have people, or you have policy decisions made across the global south, maybe in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, India, whatever it is, and you sit down and realize that people need development. So what you then do is you find a gazetted wetland, you pour soil into it, then you construct something. Whether it is an industry, and the argument would be, this industry will provide 3,000 jobs. Good, people need jobs. But what is the ripple effect? Because in his infinite wisdom, God created an ecosystem on the planet where a river has tributaries, there is a wetland and a peatland, and the water from here will balance off what will go in the other corner. It is, and I tell people, it is like the human body. The human body is built in such a way that if it gets too hot, I will sweat. The sweat glands will, God has designed that. And then if I eat bad food, I'll get a running stomach because I'll clear out whatever poisonous stuff that has gone inside me. So we have that kind of ecosystem. I eat so much, I have to go to the toilet. Then if something is choking me, I'll cough it out, that kind of thing. So that is how nature is and our planet. So if you build in a wetland, whatever you put there for whatever reason, there was a reason why God created the wetland. He knew where the land would be, where the wetland would be, and he created it. So if you decide to think that it is not necessary and you build in it, a few years later, this water is going to look for where it gets sucked into what would have been the wetland, and there is no place, then it finds itself on the shores. Sometimes that's why we have rising sea levels and rising water levels, and we don't understand that. The smart people in Dubai woke up one day and they started something called, out of technology, rainwater harvesting. I think they harvest the cloud harvesting. I don't know the right term, but I think you're probably familiar with it. And I think it's either last year or must be either last year. They were massive floods. The heavens poured and Dubai flooded, simply because we had tampered with the status quo. You see, there is this.
I'm not convinced of that that was a
I
fact.
think so. I mean, this is my view because, and it's my view is not the right one, but for me, when I looked at what they have done it for a while,
Yeah.
but like anything technology, you think will hit at T minus X minutes and then something goes wrong because it is not part of the original status quo. And by the way, this is not proven. It is my view. It is my personal view. And that's how I relate to tampering with certain things. So I thought to myself at the time, the clouds opened, the floods were massive. They did a bit of covering it up a little bit, and life went on. So I look at that. I look at floods coming up somewhere because the water is trying to find its path, and it doesn't have it because of economic development. Someone has thought, let me put up an industry, let me grow rice in this wetland, let me do this, let me do that, let me cover it, let me put up a hotel. So I think to myself that in trying to balance our need for economic development and you know, develop, like David mentioned, if you drive through Nairobi and you see so many cars, then they say, you know, we are really developing because there's so many people, lots of traffic, you're just pumping it. But the cities were built for certain populations, certain limits. So when you're going to increase either population or increase certain aspects of development, then you need to balance that. If you look at London or most of the European cities, their drainage systems and were done so many years ago. That's why I think we used to have a story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, who once drove all the rats from London into the sewers and they disappeared. And you would read stories of Charles Dickens of the tunnels. Everything was purposely built at the time to cater for those, for the kind of development at the time. So for me, I think, and I'm not an expert, I'm just your average Joe, I think we need to rethink how we change our environment to under the guise and excuse of economic development and sustainability. We talked earlier on about discovery of oil. There is the eco pipeline that is being constructed across East Africa to transport crude oil all the way. And I see so many people doing protests about it. And people ask me, you're an environmentalist, what's your take on it? I say, you see, first of all, there is an environment management authority in each of these countries that did an environment impact assessment. And then they asked them, if we drill this oil and pull it out and put it in the ground and send it, what will happen? Oh, the environment will be impacted by this percentage and this percentage. And for me, I'm not even interested in the statistics. My view was, what if there is a spill? Just what if there is a spill? Like we have seen the spills from BP and the rest in the previous years.
Yeah.
Is the community ready for this? Is there a contingency? Let's forget about the drilling. Let's talk about what if there is a spill? How will these very poor communities where the pipeline is going through, will they be able to survive it? How will they manage? So for me, those are the kind of conversations I want even my fellow civil society people to do. Let's not just talk about stop ECOP, don't do this, don't do that. No, let's ask the pertinent questions. What if? What is the contingency? What if? Because yes, you're saying economic development, beautiful. You said the percentage of emissions that will come out of this oil will be 0.0, beautiful. On paper looks good. Now let's go to the other side. What if?
Yeah.
Let's ask the questions of the what if, and if we get the appropriate answers, then maybe we can let economic development win. But yeah, so that's
I want
So
to jump in if
I was just going to finish up with a couple of questions. You got a quick one, David?
Well, it's not so much a question, it's a comment that the question, Petrobras at the end of August, so very recently, a couple of weeks ago, basically performed the last stage of a environmental kind of licensing process to drill at the mouth of the Amazon River.
Oh.
And it finally got that through. And the idea is it going to be able to cope with exactly the question that Joseph talks about, what it does is drill. So it's part of the environmental testing. So the whole process is geared towards actually saying, you give us a question, we'll answer it. You give us a question, we'll answer it. But the whole direction of it is still further development in those ways. There's still further steps in those ways. Because there's only one way to make money. And I want to talk with you maybe offline about this, because I can go on forever. But there is a mechanism that Richard and I have been talking about, which is to create a money that is made by nature, which is made by nature being intact. You make it if you don't drill it, as opposed to you make it if you drill it. Now you have a choice. Now you can choose. Now government can choose between making the money by not exploring or making the money by exploring. Without that counterpoint, you're always going to step towards drilling.
Yeah.
Actually, Andrea, just before you come in and just to interject, and I have made this argument before in Azerbaijan at COP, and I said, some of you countries have the global south countries, and they owe you a lot, massive debt. And you are out there telling them, don't drill, don't do this, don't do that. And it is just like you are suggesting it to them. So I said, why don't you, in the spirit of communalism, what in Africa they call Pan-Africanism, say, you owe us $100 million. Keep your oil in the ground for the next 25 years, and we will forgive that $100 million debt.
Mm-hmm.
But because in the 25 years, this country that was supposed to drill oil will have found different technological advancements or solutions to do solar, to do nuclear, to do so many other things, and they will not even need the fossil fuels. Now, that needs to be an unselfish, uncapitalistic approach that needs to come from those countries that owe, where the countries in the global south owe them money. I mean, that needs to kind of be a better conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to take this one step further, which is where we go. If you go through the governments, you won't get it, because the governments have their own agenda. So what our proposal does is actually go to the young people. And why the young people? Because young people and young professionals in the world, especially in the richer world, are standing at the point of inheriting something like $20 trillion over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Just think about what they can do if they want to. So this becomes their choice. Is the trees they plant. Now these trees are the giving nature a sovereign role. That's what it does. So I'm going to pull back from this. I'd love to talk more about it. I'd love to connect and have a chat. Yeah.
I think you two need to follow up. So you just said, Joseph, the global south owes the global north a lot of money, and it's kind of an ironic sort of statement, because the global north has been extracting from the global south for hundreds of years and not paid their way. But anyway, but we've also had conversations about this from an economics point of view. So there's another angle. So you were recently appointed the regional director for climate change Africa, climate change advisory for East Africa. Can you just share a little bit more about what that's about, and then just finished up with what's next for you, what keeps you hopeful? All right.
Okay. And that one is it's the realization that you have countries like Uganda that go and lobby for change policy and to make a difference. Then you have Rwanda, then you have Kenya, then you have Dar es Salaam, then you have Southern Sudan and Burundi, across the board, the East African region. And the Little Ones Go Green story has been a story of successful positive advocacy, because our advocacy is positive. It is positive activism, the one that goes into the grassroots. So that position is to try and see how I can help multiply and what should I call it? Amplify what we have been doing in Uganda across the entire East African region so we can lobby collectively. How do you drive climate change advocacy, not just in Uganda, but in Rwanda, in Kenya, and then take it to stakeholders on the global stage and say, listen, this is what we think we can be able to do in the East African region. We have done this, it has worked, we have piloted it. How can you help us support and grow it, from driving education projects, climate change education, to literacy, to inclusivity, bringing children living with disabilities into the fold, having a oneness about the integration of East Africa in the climate change discourse. So that is what this entails. And it is just a broader load on the shoulders, but a load that is now and be payable. But how do we help transform communities in different countries in the East African region and help them be able to follow the Little Ones Go Green story and create so many pockets of Little Ones Go Green in Rwanda, in Southern Sudan, in Kenya, in Tanzania? That is the long and short of it. And I am hopeful that we will keep doing this. And thanks to the shit show, my friends from the Climate Crisis Club, who are ever amazing in trying to churn out ideas and put voices out, we'll keep the voices of the children alive. And like I always say, a child's mind is like wet cement. Whatever you write on it remains permanent. Whatever we do in life, whether it's in economics, or it's in business, or it's in climate, or it's in religion and faith, let us involve the children, the young ones, because when we are long gone tomorrow, they will pick up this mantle and move with it as we go along. I always say this, and I'll pick it up. There's a gentleman called William Golding. He was an amazing English author, and he wrote a book called Lord of the Flies. And in essence, it showed that man, I think, is inherently evil. He only tends to be tamed by the forces of civilization. That's why when these boys were marooned on an island, they turned into something else until they were later rescued. So while we're out there, let's use civilization to groom ourselves, to make us better, to make our children better. And our environment will always be our future, and our future will always be our own responsibility. It's not the responsibility of governments, of anybody, it is ours. So let us take it upon ourselves to make a difference to our environment. I am hopeful. And thank you for the shit show. Let's keep it going. And whatever promised, I'll drop in the YouTube link. I'll get our tech guys to look at the website so it's up and running. And David, I will drop you an email. And everybody else, Joe, that is not the Joseph. Pleasure to meet you all guys. And whenever you see one of the...
Are you going to stay on for a bit? Are you going to stay on for a bit?
Yeah, I'm going to stay on. I'm going to stay on. Yeah, cool. I'm going to grab a coffee, then I'll get back on. So, but I'm listening in. So you can keep me in the background. I'll grab a quick coffee, but I'm with you. And I have enjoyed this. It's I like the thoughts, I like the views, and it shines perspective on things that we can do. And it's incumbent on us to do better, because if not for our own self, for our children and our grandchildren.
Yeah.
Adios, amigos.
All right.
See you soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. All right, I'll drop you out, and then when I see you back in, I'll bring you back up. All right.
Bring us a coffee.
Yeah. I figured you would enjoy listening to him. It's a beautiful story,
thank you.
right? And what a massive impact, you know. It's just
that's a lot of trees.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
I think
we sort of people.
We forget it. It's I keep saying this about nature's pace, right? If you look at how nature actually progresses, it doesn't prejudge what it does, and it does it in tiny steps. And it does it so that each step costs very little, if nothing at all. And it makes sure that each step brings something back. So that's what the trees do. That's why, it's the fruit trees, because it brings something along. And so you can afford to carry on doing it. And we tend to get stuck in thinking we must save everything. We must have a plan, and we must progress in that way. And I was reading up about the guy who came up with the statement about, every plan every campaign plan, kind of fails at the first point of contact with the enemy or something. An Austrian Prussian army general back in 1800s. And his campaigns were amazing at the speed at which they can progress, and brought about the unification of Germany in that way. And his plans are basically that you can't tell what's going to happen, so don't prejudge it. Don't go about having these massive plans that you then think you have to stick with, because they're bound to fail, and even more so today. We know we've got all sorts of things about what's been happening in different places, politics and all those things. They're just indications that it's bound to fail. So take the steps. That's the right step for you to take at this moment. Don't prejudge it. Don't have to be really big, but make sure that it benefits someone. It benefits someone, and they know it, so that they can reward you back. That's how nature works.
Yeah. All right. Shall we get on to the news?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Wow.
If you guys see Joseph sort of popping in, can you bring him back up? And I'll feature us. All right. So I'll start with the stuff that we're not going to talk about, and then we're going to rip through the topics that we are going to talk about. So here's some of the things that we're not going to talk about. We've seen cyber attacks across the UK, and I think also across Europe at the airports, which have created a lot of chaos. The blob, which is a massive band of heat across the ocean, is back, except this time it's stretching across the entire North Pacific. Ted Cruz compares threats to ABC by FCC chair to those of a mob boss. It's amazing. It kind of feels like this was such a long time ago, right? This is all since our last show. This is what I do. I go back to our last show and move forward. Trump may have accidentally posted on Truth Social calling on Pam Bondi, the AG, to use the power of the Justice Department more aggressively. That post was later deleted, but it actually stayed up for quite some time. In Australia, Optus went down, and that outage has been linked to 2 to 3 deaths. So that was kind of a bit alarming. In Manila, they've seen more protests, and this is over flood control corruption. So the protests across Asia are sort of keep erupting. India and Pakistan haven't been in the news in the last couple of days, but the floods have had massive impacts, not just numbers of deaths and infrastructure destruction, but the biggest impact will be more long-term, because these are the bread baskets of those countries, and they've seen absolute devastation with their agriculture. Global fossil fuel plans exceed Paris limits by 120%. So I saw, we're going to be hitting 3 degrees Celsius by 2050. Europe is now preparing for war, and we've seen a lot of drone activity, but now it's in Denmark. And so the Europeans are talking about a drone wall. This is a kind of an ironically amusing one. Grindr and Pornhub both crashed during Charlie Kirk's memorial service. So obviously a lot of people are talking about the hypocrisy. There was a catastrophic, I don't know if you guys saw this, road collapse in the center of Bangkok yesterday, and I just couldn't believe that nobody died. I've seen a report, and I need to see if it's going to get more coverage, that Australia is very close to joining BRICS. And to me, it makes absolute sense. A quarter of their exports go to China. It's their biggest trading market. So former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted on 2 charges. And Trump says he will not allow Israel to annex occupied West Bank. And obviously Netanyahu's on his way there. So we'll see if he changes his mind. So that's the stuff we're not going to talk about. Anything else that you guys would add to that list?
So much. We don't have that time.
Anything new there?
I'd already unfortunately mentioned it that I wasn't going to talk about, which is BP's energy report. But anyway, that's...
All right. Okay, so David, do you want to kick us off? United Nations, 80 years old.
Yeah.
Been a bit of crazy week.
I mean, every time I see it, it reminds me of Star Wars, when they have that committee along and they float in those things and they talk about how, this thing is carrying on, we must do something, and someone else comes and raises an objection and goes along through. So, and what I actually see is for a long while, the whole structure of it is difficult, but fundamentally, Richard and I very feel strongly about this. Whoever pays, the piper calls the tune.
Yeah.
So the one largest money contribution to the United Nations is the US. China is coming up second, very rapidly along in that way. The US is very political. China keeps domestic politics as something we don't deal with in terms of other people's domestic politics in that way. So it always stays in that sense out of it, always abstains, and in those sort of stuff. So what you end up with out of the voice of the countries is really that America has that dominance, and that's what it kind of has been. And as an instrument, I think the King of Jordan, in his speech to the United Nations, he got up there and says, I come here today repeating what I said last year, basically. And then he talked about how the Israel-Palestine problem has been this topic of discussion from the beginning of the establishment of the UN. I think you have to kind of ask, is the UN actually relevant? What is it actually doing? But ultimately, I think what it says is, at this sort of international level, at that kind of governance of the international level, where people have a sense that they think there's a right thing to do, are the governments really the things that prevent the right thing being done? And the answer to that may lie in the fact that what are governments for? They are there to put their country first. They're not there to look after another country. They were never there to look after another country or people in another country. They're always there to repel them as invaders. So the whole thing is kind of like, I don't know how many years it's got left, but I very suspect this funding is going to dry up.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we haven't got anything better, and it's never been set up to succeed, and that's the thing that worries me. If Richard or Joe, do you want to? Because I mean, for me, the funniest thing was, I'll move over, the whole escalator incident. So I shared with you a whole bunch of clips.
You should talk about the escalator incident in case people didn't catch it.
Yeah, oh well, but there was this instant reaction, right? Oh, we've got to look into this. We've got to investigate this. So Trump and Melania, as soon as they got onto the escalator, it stopped working. In the United Nations hall, there, his teleprompter didn't work. And the third thing was there was some translation issues, which could easily have been a technical issue, which I'm sure would have happened for the whole time. But there was this instant reaction, like, well, we've got to look into this, got to investigate this, people should be fired. So it turns out, even though he's still looking for culprits, it turns out the cameraman that was accompanying Trump and Melania went to the top of the stairs to film as they came up the escalator, and that triggered a safety mechanism. And then the teleprompter was being controlled by people from the White House. So the two big issues that he won't stop banging on about was not the United Nations fault, but he still will not stop about the fact that there was this sabotage and people saying he could have been assassinated. It's like, oh, for God's sake. it's just this constant alternative reality. It's exhausting. But the other thing is the SDG goals. Apparently the report's come out, so I need to look at it. But I saw a summary. So only 35% of the global targets are on track, and we're going backwards on progress everywhere. Do you remember that guy Hans? He was a Swedish guy, Hosling or something like that. He died a few years ago. He's amazing. And he did some data sharing, and Joe, we've talked about it before, where he was showing how much better we are doing than what we believe we're doing. And it was really quite revolutionary. Hans Hosling or something like that. Does that ring a bell?
Does ring a bell. It should.
Yeah, he's brilliant. But now we are literally going backwards. So we're going backwards. The major areas, 6 areas that need focus: education, food systems, energy access, digital inclusion, climate and biodiversity, jobs and social protection. So, every time we lift a women out of poverty, every time we give children access to education, the impacts are multiplied, and we're taking our eye off the ball. And obviously the Trump focus is not helping that. But Joe, did you have any other thoughts that you kind of...
Well, I think we kind of take the United Nations for granted as just this body, and I must say I never really thought about what it was about, having grown up in the era that I did, and only more recently realizing how the history, or the recent history before it was founded, would have been a very strong motivator to get it going, right? And I think right now, people have long forgotten why the United Nations is there. I got reminded when I heard about this inscription that's at the entrance of the United Nations, and it quotes the second Secretary General of the United Nations, Dag Hammarskjöld, I think it is. And the quote is, "The United Nations was not created in order to bring us to heaven, but in order to save us from hell." And it reflects what it was about. It was basically out of the Second World War, a realization by, calmer minds,
Yeah.
or smarter people, that
But
we have a tendency. I beg your pardon?
Sorry, I just kind of have a very, I mean, between heaven and hell is purgatory, and being stuck forever in purgatory is hell.
Yeah, it was a thing about just the understanding, like in the Lord of the Flies, we understand that our worst nature is to descend into a state where we're just going to fight for ourselves. And then you need to have thoughts that rise above that can perhaps guide the conversations. I think the UN has had its role, and it's been eroded over the years. I think it has had it had brighter days in terms of what people saw it as. It had much more credibility in the past. And I think the most recent few days, that's actually something to be really concerned about. I'm actually very pleased with the European, or at least the rest of the world's response, or the way they seem to have responded to Trump's comments from the podium. It's not anything like what he's used to, I think, on home ground. It's been pretty harsh, actually.
I mean, by now,
BBC ripped him apart.
Yeah, but by now, I think the world's, the world's countries already have raised tariffs that they are facing, and all those things. So there is really nothing to lose, not to respond honestly about how they feel about it. I mean, this is not like 6 months ago or 9 months ago, where you were facing a different sort of situation and you wanted to appease. Now there's no point in appeasing, because you know what, you're already paying 35% or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's definitely a massive geopolitical global shift. That story I was watching about Australia joining BRICS. Its role in the Pacific, it might be a small country, but it's got a big impact as far as its relationship with the US goes. And then, of course, a big part of this week, we've got climate week going on in New York. I've never been. At some point, I've got to get to one of these global events, but I try not to fly unnecessarily, right? The climate commitments are starting to come out, and the Europeans have not given their commitment yet. But they've sort of said, we'll have it ready for COP30. But China gave theirs, and there's been a bit of a negative reaction that it's too weak to stave off global catastrophe. They're the second biggest polluter historically, all that sort of stuff. But I think one of the people, I'm just trying to find the name who referenced it, but basically China is moving so much faster than any other country in decarbonisation that they might have made a commitment, but every time they've made a commitment, they've superseded that commitment within a few years. So I don't know. I don't take too much away from that, but I do feel like everyone but America is moving forward when it comes to climate commitments. So that sort of, I don't expect anything brilliant to come out of COP30. I think we're all in the same boat. But But I think it's a balancing act. We've got the governments and the leaders of the world doing their thing, but all of us need to, I always say we need to reduce our energy and material consumption by 70%. So what does that look like for you? Your clothes, how you travel, how you live, the energy you use, how you get around, what you eat. We all need to do it, and we're doing it for our kids, right? So what are we willing to give up today so that our children don't have to walk around with an oxygen tank on their back? That's basically where we are, right? But yeah, any thoughts on that, Richard?
Yeah, I think we rewind to COP and we say that, and it's something that Joe touched upon, the cost of going there. COP was never set up to be inclusive in that sense. COP was set up to give people of the rich world an outlet for effectively trying to express a long political roadmap for how we wanted the world to look without any kind of regard of economic reality in the rest of the planet. And that's a problem. I think commitments are one thing, but they always crash with, the reality of economic decisions that need to be made. And those are becoming much more acute because money is running out, and it's very clear. And the UN is, to me, it's obsolete in the sense that it cannot make executive decisions. It's not set up as an organization that has any ability to take and impose decisions. It's a forum for trying to avoid what Hammarskjöld says, hell. And I've had large question marks about UN for a long time because I think it's an incredibly inefficient organization. And everyone I know has been associated with it is like not really living in the real world. And while it's very good to have a forum to discuss things on a supranational level, let's limit the remit of the UN to that and stop pretending that it actually has any executive powers, because it wasn't set up to actually have that. Because ultimately, it's always the economic reality that decides the path you're going to take. So you need to affect the economics at large if you want to have any real impact on the future.
Yeah.
And UN cannot do that.
Yeah. I think like the World Bank, the IMF, and the UN, they all need to be transformed for the future. Nothing is fit for purpose anymore.
No.
So I think but I hope we can move forward. Like I always say, I don't think they've ever been set up to succeed. But Elon Musk was talking about how useless they were a long time ago, but we don't have anything else.
No.
And I certainly don't want the oligarchs running the shows. So, I think we need to fight for that global perspective, but make it more efficient for the times that we're living in. Do you want to have a quick chat before we move on, David?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think the first part is, you mentioned about China exceeding what it says in that way. But what happens is when you read the news about their NDC, the nationally determined contributions, how much they're going to cut their emissions by as their national target. Pretty much every kind of climate, agency and so on just comes out lambasting China and saying you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
And that's just not going to help. And essentially the whole world is sided with the Americans in saying China is an evil, when China is actually producing the materials and the technologies that will help the world forward with what they need. No one else is going to be capable of producing it.
Yep.
And no one else can do that in that time. But every country that has a need for them is stepping back from engaging with China. And every agency within those countries are coming out and saying China is not doing enough. So this is the setting that you have, is exactly a replica of, say, what you talk about, this incessant conversations and stuff. This is a different sort of economic problem that people fail to recognize. When Richard says we're running out of money, it sounds weird because all money is essentially already encumbered. There is something it's allocated to. So what happens when we are running out of money is we are running out of money that's not already accounted for something else. And in that situation, what you need is the people in the countries who can actually produce new stuff to come along and willing to offer them at prices which can be afforded. And that's not the European countries. That's not America. And that's not many of the other kind of producing countries. The only one who's capable of doing that is China. So when it comes out with actually an emission cut on top of willingness to provide that, the answer should not be you are evil and you're not doing enough. That's the mentality. That's what prevents any sort of progress.
Yeah, we're out here in Asia. We see it with different eyes, you know. We really do, because we get a different. The Western media perspective and the Asia media perspective are very, very, very different beasts. And Singapore's very pragmatic, sort of sitting there in the middle, right? So it's interesting. All right, so we're going to move on to another story, and that is basically the conclusion is we're all getting dumber. I would like to think that I'm not, but anyway. And there's an article that was published by a guy on Substack called, his name's James Marriott, and it's called The Dawn of a Post-Literate Society. And there's so much in this that really got my attention. And one of the first things was young people today will spend 25 years of their life on their mobile phones. Just that, right? And but what it does is it goes back through history, and it's sort of like, you know, we know about the printing press, but it was when countries got to 50% of literacy that democracy flourished. And so basically what's happening now is, you know, our IQs have been slipping for the last 20 or 30 years anyway, but now they're starting to slip quite fast. Academically in a lot of Western nations, because, you know, in Asia, education is a huge priority, even in the poorest countries. You know, maths, science, and English, or reading and writing, if it's a local language, all slipping down. And basically what happened before the Age of Enlightenment, when people became literate, is that was when emotions and mysticism and all that sort of stuff sort of controlled our world, right? And then we went into the Age of Enlightenment, which was because of this significant change with access to information and the ability to read. And now we're slipping back into an age of mysticism, and it's the 10-second videos on TikTok. It's the people out there, the influencers out there who are talking about issues in little short, sharp, compressed ways. It's all making us dumber. And basically, like when you really look at it, you know, I think we need to do something about this. I think it's terrible. And then you've got these things like the meta glasses coming in, where, you know, I've always got all these numbers and data and stuff rumbling around in my head. So if someone raises a point, I've got some data linked somewhere back, probably that I picked up 10 years ago. With the meta glasses on, I can just say, give me access to that information, so my brain doesn't have to go through the process of sorting through, you know, all of these different neural pathways. So it will make my brain less efficient, which will ultimately make me dumber. So I don't know. Did you have a chance to either read the longer article or watch the interview? Did anyone have a chance? Because I thought it was.
Yeah, I read through part of the article. Not the whole one. Is quite long. And it tells.
See, attention span.
Yeah. Attention span is shortening. Where was the executive summary? No, but what you're describing is absolutely true. You know, it links to our now perceived way of not wanting to do any hard work but achieve the same results, right? And, you know, the TikTok video is a symptom of that. Reading a whole book is actually very, very satisfactory. if you then afterwards watch the film, you can see how the adaptation was not exactly, to the point, or they skipped some details, etc. And that's part of the whole process. But most importantly, and I think in a subtle way, this is how you actually end up in a world where you effectively have science deniers out there.
Yeah.
You are trying to diminish the truth as or the knowledge into something that becomes subjective.
Yeah.
And that's very, very troubling, obviously, because there are some in my world, kind of absolute truths, and those truths then leads itself open to interpretation. But if you attack the foundation, you cut off the whole basis for having a civil and nuanced argument about things.
Yeah. Joe, I know you're not a massive reader, but what are you thinking?
Well, I think there's a change in the way things are being offered, and that's fundamentally, I think, what makes it interesting. Is I consume voraciously in all directions. I try to get into stuff which is slightly past my usual areas of understanding, because I've always been curious about that. So as a child, my parents bought the Encyclopedia Britannica and the Children's Encyclopedia and the Science Encyclopedia that came with that, and I read all the kids stuff, definitely, and I used the Encyclopedia Britannica at an age when no child should be near one of those things, right? So I have an unhealthy relationship with curiosity. But at the same time, I'm also a very bad reader. I'm not good at that, and I always found that books, by their nature, tended to be fluffy in terms of, you read a whole book to get basically the executive summary from it, right? And I think there's something in between in terms of powerful communication. There's some great communicators who have the ability to draw you in terms of a bit of entertainment knowledge, the storytelling, and they're able to engage. And we need more of that. So that's what I'm working on right now. I'm trying to help science communicators do a better job of it, so that people stay in the room when they're trying to tell you about why something is important. Like in a while, we'll talk about the autism story in the U.S. and the repercussions of it. And I think what I'm going to be doing is what I think a lot of politicians need to be doing. Need to be able to tell the story in a compelling way, so people can understand the whys a bit more and be wiser as they're telling their stories. I'm not actually upset with the idea of having really quicker and bite-sized communication. As long, actually not as long. I'm not going to put a caveat on that. I'm actually going to say that we're actually entering a world where I think we're going to have people with a lot of what's called a stack, right? A talent stack. They're going to be people who know a lot about a lot of things, maybe not great depth, but they're going to know a lot about a lot of things because of the kind of stuff that we have right now. And maybe it's just my algorithm, but I do learn a lot of little things about a lot of things from my YouTube feed and my Instagram from time to time, and I personally find that quite useful in terms of figuring out what's interesting, what should I be looking at as well. So I think
you're not normal, Joe. I mean, that's a polymath tendency, right? Yeah, but you're not. Well, am I breaking out? Up? Sorry.
No.
Did you? Okay. Because I'm like you. I take up information from everywhere, right? But that's not what most people do. Someone who's raging against the machine about some issue that annoys them because somebody's told them that it's a big issue, like transgender rights, right? They're just focusing on that. They're not looking at all the other stuff, right?
Well, that's the important thing. I think the important thing is a foundation, right? Whatever your operating system is, that's usually going to be, I think, how it could lead to the rest of it. And I'm lucky enough to have been brought up, I think, in a household where we used to talk about things. My father would talk about bigger ideas. I sat down for Latin lessons. My father tried to teach me about the law. It's otherwise what you call an abusive child relationship, but it turns out that it made me understand quite a few things at a deeper level. So when it comes to things like justice and ethics, I think my dad gave me enough of a perspective on things to understand from a different perspective, and I must admit as well, not always a popular perspective. People actually don't like objective people. People like friends who are going to jump on their side much more than someone like me who can see both sides of the story.
Yeah, I've been there. So a couple of the lines from this piece is, our culture is being transformed into a smartphone wasteland. Cut off from the cultural riches of the past, we are condemned to live in a narcissistic eternal present. Then, the big tech companies like to see themselves and invested in spreading knowledge and curiosity. In fact, in order to survive, they must promote stupidity. So I'm just going to share the article here. I really, really want people to read it. And what you were just saying, Joe. So I've been talking to my boys about this stuff, obviously, for a long time. But the meta glasses came up, and I challenged my 70s. He's the tech nerd of the family, right? And I challenged him. He showed me the ads, right?
Yeah.
And the ads are beautiful. You can go and identify a plant or see if a fruit is ready to eat, or little cheeky conversation between two lovers, all that sort of stuff. And I'm just thinking, privacy in public bathrooms. There's a major problem in parts of Asia, and I don't know if it's happening in the north as well, but up skirting. So people are taking pictures up skirts in public transport. You get this tech on your face, right? And if everyone's got it, nobody pays attention. Every conversation you have, intimate moments with a partner, it's just so. And I've challenged my boys to come back and tell me what the negatives are, but I don't know. Like, social media was supposed to be, it was the great democratization of information. And here we are, 10, 15, nearly 20 years later, and it's basically almost destroyed democracy. The same companies own artificial intelligence, and the same companies own this technology. And, there's an article about Mark Zuckerberg. We all know the story of how he started Facebook. It was to check out chicks and rate them, right? So has he grown up? And then you got the Peter Thiel stuff. He's doing a whole bunch of weird Antichrist stuff at the moment. I don't know if you've seen that. Curtis Yarvin. He was just in the UK. I don't know if you guys heard about it. The philosopher. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in the background, and these are the guys that are behind this tech, and it's time for us to think about it. But we've got to talk to our kids about it. Anyone? Any thought? Sort of final thoughts?
Think about things like Meta's glasses, just to talk about what the technology is, right? What it is actually is, and why it is more important now. It's not a new concept. You remember Google's Google Glass? That was something that they were working on before, and it fell out of fashion. Partly because it was so weird looking, I guess. It still actually exists as a product nowadays. It's actually very much used for augmented reality to help in the engineering world. It actually works really well as technology. But what they've done now is they've packaged it all together in a Ray-Ban frame, and it has to be set a very, very thick kind of Ray-Ban frame. So it's not the coolest pair of glasses you can be wearing around, but it has built-in camera, it has a built-in projection system as well, so you can see information floating in front of you in virtual space. I actually think of it's for me, it's the dream that I've been waiting for in some aspects, right? Because as someone who has a very poor memory, I would love to be doing my presentations with Meta glasses on, or something similar to that, as in to help me remember things. But I do share your concern about what the rest of it is like, because I think what you're talking about is the constant gathering of information. That the default on the glasses is it's always on. It's always going to be sensing what's visually present. It's always going to be listening to what's there. And the objective is to provide you with the kind of necessary feedback or information that you would want on the fly. So it's a design issue, and I think what the article was talking about, or the contention is, okay, the other people around you don't really have a choice, as in, like, with even with smartwatches that have cameras on them, there's been a lot of care to say that when you start recording with your smartwatch or whatever it is, it's going to make some kind of audible signal to people around that a recording has begun. It's going to have a flashing light or something to let people know that there's a recording going on. And I think that's what isn't going to be present, or at least in the design, of the glasses. That's not being implemented. It's not going to be one of those things where, as you walk into the room, there's a warning, a clear sign that, oh no, you've come in with a surveillance device, in essence.
Yeah, it sort of matches with the AI companion sort of piece to me. It's like we've all got to sort of see if we can get some control over our own environment and data gathering on us. I mean, we all know that we're sharing stuff everywhere all the time. David, do you want to jump in?
A couple of things, I think, on the intelligence side. I've been playing around with AI and Gemini Pro and stuff, and I've realized a few things about what it does and what happens. And it is very appealing in the way, it seems to answer your questions and stuff, until you actually look at it and you think, well, you're not really catching the nuance of what I'm trying to describe, or something like that. So where that actually then comes to is a question of agency and reclaiming agency. I think these things are in that sense of dumbing, because you don't feel any value to you having agency in the first place anyway. So, if your job is to go out and put out material just to fill out the, whatever chat space or something in that way, then as long as you put 3 out or 10 out a day, it doesn't make any difference. So you go down into that route, because there's no real value that you attribute to what you're doing yourself. The value is in the measured counts, and I think that's a very strong element to it. I think it speaks somewhat to what Joe was talking about, in terms of saying, when he was reading and he not reading, but assimilating information and those sort of things. The value there wasn't in the counts in that way. But we have kind of moved to a world where everything is measured, and what is measured are quantities. They are not kind of agency, the value of having agency. So I think that dumbing down is actually a reflection of that. I don't see as we are as people inherently more stupid in that way. I think that there is no value to having a longer attention. There's more value to saying I read 3 books in half an hour than to say, actually, that argument is great. I like that argument about what this is in that way. So that's a different sort of perspective along. And if you want to recover intelligence in that sense, you have to kind of recover value. You have to recover what is genuinely the things we value, what is the value that we offer in that way. And then the other thing with the glasses, I remember looking at the HoloLens when it came out back in, I think it was like 2015. And I was really excited. I was working, I think Richard, we just started working together.
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of data, and I was thinking, gosh, I can really use this. I can actually combine the augmented reality together with kind of what I see on the screen and stuff. And, you can actually get your trading models or your business models and things together in those ways. So I think there's a real place and a real potential for these things. The spying element, which is really where the attraction and the draw is today, because it kind of plays into this sort of spy film type thing. You go in there with your mini stuff, right? Is this draw at the moment? And so you go from live streaming to kind of, which is you hold out a phone in that way, to a kind of a continuous streaming of life in that sense. So
I just want to really encourage everyone to remember that females are already having a very negative experience in the digital space, and this is only going to enhance that negative experience. Oh, what happened?
I'm trying to
so
drag you up there.
if we're gonna do these things, we've got to think about it holistically, right? So women online, what they have to deal with, the rape threats, death threats. We were talking about sextortion, AI. When they put a female's face on a body, 97% of it is towards women. So now we're going to add another dimension. So I think I totally get what we can do with it. We never spend any time thinking about what's not good.
Well, I think that goes back to the value. I mean, I don't think it's that. I think it goes back to the value, and it goes back to a presumption. And I would argue against William Golding's Lord of the Flies. I think it's wrong. I think that is how you control a population, is to present the image that people on their own are savages.
Yeah.
I think what Elinor Ostrom and other economists and people have demonstrated is in fact the opposite. And if you think about how humanity came to be in the situation where it is now, if people were savages, they'd have killed themselves out a long time ago. It's not because of kind of like these sort of, and this kind of hierarchical rise of the, you mentioned the techno bros and stuff, they're only in the position they're in because of the investment funds that support them. Elon Musk getting $1 trillion for his compensation. That's only possible because the pensions feel they actually need that money for them, and the pensions feel that is because the people feel they need the money in their pensions. That's why they're going to pay him basically, like quarter of the company over the next 10 years or something in order to do this. And this part has to come back down to this aspect of saying, what is that value? Going back to, our guest earlier on about that conversation with the young people. I think it's actually the other way around. We actually want to go along and actually say to them, it's a mess, but you have genius and you can show us a better. So we're going to ask you to show us a better. Rather than worrying about how they're being dumbed down, we're not actually inviting them to rise above the mess that we've created.
Yeah. Just want to share a little thing about, and I just want to also caveat that it was a sample size of 4. It was my daughter and her friends were at home, and they were producing some kind of video, and they were publishing some video. And I just suggested that maybe they were using AI to do some stuff. And they actually kind of repelled that notion quite adamantly, as in like, oh, no, we don't use AI. And I was like, oh, it was quite interesting to me that, some of the assumptions or presumptions that we have that the AI is so ubiquitous, could well be that, AI could be the next Facebook, right? As in the young people may not be the ones using it. Right, so that's something else to have a think about as well, as in like what we think sometimes going to happen. Like the stat of the young people using their phones 25 hours a day.
No,
I'm not opposed
years.
to that. 25 years
of their life.
25 years of their life, right? I'm honestly not opposed to that if it produces something of value, right? I think we can all do 25 years of something that produces value, and I'm not opposed to that. So
they're all going to have those big bumps on the back of their necks, right? Posture, but it's going to impact posture. It's going to impact eyes. It's going to, I know. I'm with you. And apparently, the young lingo today is that's so AI. If a young person says that to you, it means that's fake. So and we never know what they're going to do, right? And I think that's why we need to have the conversations about this. Let's move on to autism and Tylenol. Joe?
Oh yeah,
that's why I've kept you up.
Well, so I kind of ran ahead of this story because I follow a podcast called Science Versus, and what they had done was they ran ahead of the story too, and they basically realized and figured out that this is what they were going to be saying, that it was about Tylenol or paracetamol, and saying that that's the link in pregnancy. That's the big link that it was to autism. And so they did the work, which I have to say, it sounds like the U.S. administration did not do. going deeper into the science. Now, the famous study that's come up in all of this, by the way, is one that was done in Sweden. And why it was such a big study is because Sweden, because of its free healthcare, had a lot of data about a lot of pregnant women and children and the numbers following that. So they had numbers on medication, and they had numbers in terms of outcome and stuff like that. Now, there is something in there in terms of the first look, right? So this is about data. When you look at data, the first look would actually sort of say, and again, this is about confirmation bias. If you go in and say, I'm looking for data to show a link between this and that, there is actually data that seems to suggest there's a higher probability that if the mother is taking the equivalent of paracetamol, that there is a link towards autism, right? And people can sometimes end up there and go like, that's significant. And I think that the factor was like 20%. So it was actually a very significant statistic correlation, right? Until what you do is you bring in the next level, which is what you have to do is to remove confounders, right? And ask questions about what else could cause this kind of relationship to happen, right? And what essentially was found is that when you think about autism itself and what is usually linked to autism, it's usually genetic. And there's usually a link to a parent that also has that they're usually a little bit on the spectrum as well. And in pregnancy, there's also a tendency for people who are on the spectrum, who are pregnant, to also encounter more problems that may be associated with pain and other discomfort, right? So what they found when they kind of factored out the fact that it may just be that if you are on the spectrum and you're pregnant, you may be encountering more headaches and things like that. You might take more things like pain relief. And it may not be causative. They may be related in terms of numbers, but they may not be the cause. And so when they took that out and they factored it in and they weighed it all up, it actually revealed that there wasn't a significant relationship at all. So what it said is that there was not enough proof to medically say that it was the reason why autism was on the rise. Now, to come out and then say that is the reason, that's the real dangerous thing that's happened right now, because by doing that, they have, pregnant parents, you know how we've been, right? The things that we try not to do and this and that, whatever it is. So in terms of danger, you're trying to prevent any kind of danger. And if you have this idea that, okay, paracetamol is bad for pregnancy, you're going to try to avoid that, right, as much as you can. And the reason why you would use paracetamol, for instance, in a pregnancy, usually it's for things that may be to do with fevers and stuff like that. And fevers themselves are very dangerous.
Yeah.
If left untreated, high fevers, these are dangerous situations in pregnancy. And if you don't treat them, they are more dangerous, first of all, than the kind of danger that paracetamol poses. And the double whammy is that people might think, okay, well, I'm going to try and find an alternative, right? And they don't generally think broadly about all the implications. So ibuprofen, which is the aspirin and stuff like that, is often seen as the alternative, the paracetamol. And when you're not pregnant, it actually is a relatively safe alternative, right? But in pregnancy, it's actually very dangerous, especially after the middle of your pregnancy, because it's linked, and this is not controversially so. It is actually linked to birth, not I won't say defects, but conditions with the affecting the kidney and stuff and all that. So it is actually more dangerous. But people might go towards that because they go, it sounds, in my mind, in my world, in the limited knowledge that I have, it sounds like the safer option. So people are actually going to be driven in that direction. And the last point that was made actually was that it's also going to take up a lot more bandwidth for medical care. As in, it used to be you could just say, okay, well, this is the safe one, take it. Now what you have to do is go through, as a doctor, you've got to go through the whole debunking and letting people know and trying to get them to do the right thing for themselves. And that actually is also it's gonna take up time. It's gonna take away from the efficiency overall of public health care as well. So it's a triple whammy in terms of the way it's been done and the way it's been said out loud and told as truth and then put into policy. So I think the national it's IHG, I think, the health, I can't remember the name of the equivalent, but basically the American equivalent, MOH, basically has put out officially now a position which tries to thread the needle. It tries to say that there is a connection. It doesn't insist as much as Trump and everybody else tried to in the announcements, but they tried to thread the needle there and said, like, okay, there is some kind of connection. They didn't try to sell it as a very big connection, but they had to put it out because that was their mandate.
I saw some another thing in Reuters where basically there's all these potential for litigation against whoever owns Tylenol. So, just from that perspective as well, all these people with children with autism taking the company to court. Do you want me to rush through just a couple of the stories before we finish up, sort of just checking the time? So,
can I just add something to that? I think that this is if you look up in Wikipedia the kind of on autism and kind of the epidemiology of it, it has in there this chart on the discovery of planets, which kind of like, how many planets are there in the universe? Which kind of like, oh, that's a weird thing to have in there. And it's basically saying, look, we got better telescopes, we got better ways for looking at these things, so we see more planets. And I think you have to kind of bear that in mind as well. And you have to kind of go along and actually think about the picture of autism was brought forward by, I think, films like Rain Man, kind of and took very extreme cases of autism. And those are kind of the highly dysfunctional, in a sense, individuals who fail to have those social connections and everything else. But what has happened over this period is the definition of autism has expanded and now includes many other disorders that were considered under their own categories.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they're now expanded along with that. And the Harvard paper itself concludes as its reason for saying this is a cause of concern is because the use of Tylenol, paracetamol, has increased and the cases of autism have increased.
Yeah.
That's its basic main argument, that the number of lawnmowers have increased and therefore and the number of autism kids have increased, or the number of planets have increased, or that we've found have increased, and therefore this has increased. I think you have to kind of go along and says, just because science publishes a paper, it doesn't mean that what it says is actually what the reality of the science may or may not be. It's a process, and this is one step within a process. And finally, the one thing I would like to say is this is a president who advocated injecting yourself with bleach to fight COVID. So go ahead, do that.
Yeah, I think the problem is, David, that there are people who are going to be impacted, and they're going to be women who are going to be impacted. There's going to be women who can't afford to go and see a doctor.
I can tell you now, my wife is a midwife, and she already has all of those things. What Joe points out too, she is already saying, finding people who would rather put their actual child's life and their own life at risk of fever by not taking Tylenol or paracetamol at this very moment already, because they think that this means better for them. So absolutely, and I know that because she was telling me about that last night.
Yeah, right. That real front line, and that's not in America, right? That's in the UK. And I think you're all fathers, but it's a very, very, very stressful time when you're pregnant. It really is, and you try to be rational about things, but there's a lot of fear around pregnancy. I shared a piece on it just recently, even more fear today. So, but just wanted to, just a couple of things. So we didn't get a chance, but the Rapture didn't happen this week. And I'm not going to speak disrespectfully of people of faith. There was a Rapture talk where basically, I think it was the 23rd of September. Everyone who was supposed to go up should have gone up, and the rest of us are down here. And
well, technically, it may have happened and had a few people leave.
Yeah, so we're all left behind, and we're going to face hell, right? Typhoon Ragasa, obviously, absolutely came in hard. It was a super typhoon. I read an article where the last super typhoon to hit Hong Kong was at 180 kilometer winds, and this was up at 230 kilometers, right? That's a massive jump. And of course, we've got extraordinary heat in the oceans. So the floodings in Taiwan, I don't know if you saw that river break its bank and the bridge, it was immense. The Philippines, where it got hit, I think 14, 15 people still died, but it wasn't a big population area, a lot of flooding. And then, of course, it went on to Hong Kong and China, and now it's on back on the way to Vietnam and Laos. And, the poorer the country, the harder it is. A big piece of news that happened this week is it's now official that from the Stockholm Resilience Institute, the 7th planetary boundary has been crossed. There are 9 planetary boundaries, and this is ocean acidity. And this, David, when we've talked about it, you think you sort of talk about climate change being the biggest thing. So ocean acidification is the other big thing. So oceans are the stabilizers of the earth, but the breached boundaries that already exist, so the other 6 are climate change, biosphere integrity, land system change, freshwater use, biogeochemical flows, and novel entities. Novel entities, microplastics, forever chemicals, nuclear waste, that sort of thing. One of these is bad. Now, 7 out of 9 is catastrophic. They always say we can come back, but but I don't just talk about climate change because that's only just one aspect. It's all these other things coming together. David, did you want to jump in with that? Did you want to jump in?
I the ocean acidification is really important because it basically melts it dissolves all the kind of ocean creatures which have shells. So that's not a good thing. But the point is the ocean gets more acidic because of the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere, and so it gets absorbed into the oceans, and so it goes on through. So it's intimately linked with worsening climate change. 2 things go together. You're not going to get one without the other. And that's sort of part of this thing. The part I find is that I think it's actually wrong to keep saying we can make it back. I think it's actually wrong to say, there's still the window. The thing I found hardest to accept about this Potsdam thing is constantly this, you can do better or whatever. I think what that is saying is refusing to accept that we have to really seriously think about how we live our lives, what that means. It's actually going along, and what it's doing is just telling young people out there, young professionals out there, that they have no future because they see what's happening at COP, they see what's happening all those other things, and you tell them that actually, unless we pull it back, they have no future. That means they have no future.
Because at the moment, we're not pulling anything back. So,
well, there's no chance you can put it back in time. I mean, the whole point about the 7 to 10% decrease in carbon dioxide emissions and all the vitriolics that came out of that, against China, is that that's not enough to pull it back. And 7 to 10% decrease in carbon emissions in a country is huge. And the thing that people don't realize is that in order to have that sort of reduction, you have to change how much energy you use. You have to massively reduce the amount of energy you use. You can't do it just by replacing with renewables. All that does is that you forget, when things get more efficient, we use more of it.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
the lead light example, right? Lead light
Right.
bulb example. Yeah.
So you just go on through. So what you end up doing is you end up actually telling all the young people that they have no future, because you're saying that, oh, in this world, there is no nature, there is no future. But that's not how nature is. Nature will come on through, and these heavy infrastructures that we have, these great tall buildings. I got a video from my niece in a tall building in Hong Kong, and it was swaying along, and she was saying the light was hitting the wall. And I was telling her, that's the wall hitting the light. That's not the light hitting the wall. That's the wall hitting the light, because the light is not being blown by the wind. The building is.
Yeah.
And of course,
yeah.
this is within the kind of tolerance of a super typhoon. But that tolerance is for a once in so many year event of that, because things break when they get stressed too many times. And that's what's going to happen along with it. So what it does is, the message you really want is actually, this is saying we have to change.
Yeah.
Because the whole structure of nature and the world around us is changing. And we have to really change. Goes back to our conversation earlier with Joseph. Take off that jacket of conventional wisdom, allow a different one, an older one, and a better one to come along through. And you're the ones who are going to find that. You're the ones who are going to discover that. Instead of that message, what we hear is, you're doomed. You young people, you have no future. We need to rein this back in order for you to have exactly the same traffic jams and air pollution and everything else that we've got now. That's what that message is.
All right. I'm just conscious of time. So there's a new term called flash droughts. We've all heard of flash floods, and basically flash droughts have existed. They sort of identified in about 2010. And basically, this means that within a period of 3 weeks or less, the moisture level in the top 40 centimeters of soil drops severely enough to affect vegetation. We didn't talk about the whole Charlie Kirk Ice Centre shooting, Erica Kirk thing. Oh God, there's some really interesting stuff coming out. There's a lot of theories around the Charlie Kirk murder being shot from behind, not from the front. There's some stories about Erica Kirk, where she was working on part of a non-profit in Romania that is potentially accused and alleged to have trafficked children. A lot of this information is sort of dissipating. And then, of course, we had the Ice Centre shooting. And again, within moments, there was all these, we've got to go after the radical left. We've got to go after the radical left. And it turns out that this might be another young man who is immersed in this gaming world. And the story that we're being told isn't, basically, it sounds like there's this. I think we're all starting to learn more about this sort of subculture of young males who aren't affiliated to anything, but they're in these groups online, chronically online, in these chats. I can't even remember what the app is. One of my sons is on it, but they're having and basically their goal is to create chaos.
Yeah. I think is it the word Discord you're looking for? A Discord.
Discord. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but again, I talk to my son about what he does and who he talks to, and I go in sometimes and check it out. But like it's not.
No,
not
definitely is. I mean, the thing is, the motivation is just to get attention, to shake things up and do something else. I mean, they're literally, it's a growing number of nihilists, right? They just think they don't believe that the future has anything to hold for them. Probably also it's tied up to the way the world works currently for males versus females, right? I mean, if you're a little bit, you don't even have time to sort of mature into it, right? Because if you think about this, I mean, if I look at my own life and my whole trajectory when I was young, right, I kind of, it took some time to mature into the fine wine that I became in the end. But it's like on the way, it was quite a hard slog, right? So you think about you think about not being able to meet up to that standard, and you think about social media as well. So social media, if you think it's bad for women, I think guys actually also suffer from the same thing. They really start seeing how far the gap is between who they are and who they need to be in order to attract any kind of attention from a partner.
But it's not social media right, Joe. I call it like gaming media. It's not even it's small clusters, small community clusters. It's not the public wide stuff like an Instagram platform. It's something. It's a completely different thing, don't you think?
Well, it's a chat room basically, right? So your chat room. So it's not the realm is a bit smaller, but it is still that kind of a thing where you gather in groupings and you begin to have your conversations. And some Discord servers can be very large, some of them can be very small. They're scalable, and in a sense, it is for me. It is like social media is really just the people around you producing content, and thoughts are being shared with you. So if your world happens to be smaller, it just hasn't got the scale of Facebook, but it is a smaller group. It is your little village of people in that space. And you find your significance in that area. And the significance, for instance, is like, it's a trolling culture. You say something funny or inappropriate, and there's a whole bunch of people who go like, haha, that's funny, and it gives you a bit of a dopamine hit as well. So you begin to get attracted to that sort of thing, because you're not getting any other kind of attention, right? You're going to get attracted to that. And if you really think, if you can't see the future, then I can see how you can go like, well, if I'm gonna go in the most significant way I can, and wouldn't this be funny, right? And then you design the funny exit, and that's literally what I think is being done, because the inconsistencies in terms of, like, if you're supposed to have an ideology, the inconsistencies are marked. Anybody who's tried to kind of like unravel it goes like, they behave like this and like that. And if you take a step back and you go like, what really makes sense as a story is like, well, if I want to screw up as many people's lives as possible while I'm doing this, then I'm going to do something like this, right?
Yeah.
I found myself plotting if I was in a situation like that, what I would do. And
looking for
some
infamy.
of the stuff well, look, I was thinking about how, if you do something, whatever it is, if it's the last thing you do, you want to kind of have some waves go out because of it. At least you have the perversely the enjoyment of that, right? You're gonna go and set it up to be as much of a bang as possible. So, like my plan to have a recording of myself go off halfway through my funeral ceremony. I'm sure there are lots of people who have these terrible ideas in much more violent iterations, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing enough of those. We don't have to have everyone do it. We just have to see people on the fringe, and we're going to hear about the people on the fringe, and the other people who are on the fringe are going to see these people on the fringe and go like, "Oh, that was a pretty good idea."
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just gonna keep getting worse. Richard, I know you need to go.
I need to go. Never keep the doctor waiting.
Did you leave your did you enjoy your African cycling weekend?
Oh, the highlight is coming on Sunday, right? With the men's race. It started. It's been great so far. I can't believe it's taken us, 100 years before we got to the first time Africa got to organize the World Championships. And so far it looks fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
So that's still your distraction. All right. We'll leave you in peace. All right. See you next week.
See you next week.
All right. So final one. What's keeping David, Joe? What's keeping you guys distracted that could maybe inspire somebody else to go and do it or watch it or listen to it?
I don't have anything at the moment. I've just been bogged down in my own stuff a bit more, so I've been doing that.
So
I've been a very dull boy.
But what do you like? What do you do to just turn your brain off? Because I have to do I have to do it. If I don't have a couple of hours a day where I'm not sort of consuming the news or
I binge watch. I do that. So I binge watch crap. Kind of.
Yeah.
So I'm really good at consuming, kind of long TV series. Some
I think what Andrea's looking for is the details. He wants to know what the pedigree of the crap is.
I've been watching Doctor Who. Kind of the 2002 sort of from that series with David Tennant and Matt Smith and people, and it's great. I've been watching it with my daughter, episode at a time.
Nice.
And so that's one level. The other is kind of like police sort of series and stuff.
Yeah, they're always good fun.
They're kind of
British?
good fun. So
The
British and
crime?
American. British and American. They need to make sense. I like the ones where they actually, the one I'm really looking forward to watching again. The two series I'm really looking forward to watching again. One is Bones, absolutely fantastic.
Right.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. The other is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's
No,
absolutely
that's not what I
brilliant.
expected.
If you watch it and go on through, it set the trend for almost everything to come.
Right.
It's absolutely brilliant. So
Have you watched Slow Horses? The new episode.
No,
I think
haven't.
it's out or it's coming. Oh mate, that is amazing. Have you watched that yet,
Yeah.
Joe?
Well, I was going to say Slow Horses because the first episode's just dropped. I haven't. What I try to do is save up enough to
Yeah,
have
yeah.
a little bit of a binge, right? So I see that the first one's landed, so that one's something that I'm waiting to consume. If anything, just watch it for the acting choices that are being made.
Yeah.
It's one of those really delightful shows.
That's brilliant.
And the other TV show that I kind of enjoy watching is this one called Poker Face. So Poker Face, I can't remember the name of the actress, but she's the one who in Russian Doll. She's the one who's the main actress. Anyway, the plot, the essential idea is that here is a character that is able to tell if you're lying. They just know if you're lying, so they're a truth detector. And the style of the show is actually reminiscent of Columbo. So if you enjoyed Columbo and how that show kind of happened, this show takes the same format as well. So in Columbo, it always opens up with the crime, and you see someone get away with it until she shows up or until he shows up, and then it begins to unravel in its own special way. So if you
Oh.
like that kind of interplay, it's a fun show. So it's called Poker Face. I think they're in season 3, I want to say.
Okay, I'll give it. I like that sort of stuff. All right. So these turned out not to be distractions, but fascinating. I actually found them quite depressing. So both on Netflix is Jerry Springer Fights Camera Action, and the second one was Fit for TV: The Reality of the Biggest Loser. So obviously, I was watching Jerry Springer with one of my boys, and he's just like, "Who is this guy? What's going on?" To me, it was kind of like the beginning of, I don't know. It's just it was. People had no dignity on the show, and I that's something I always struggle with. And then the reality of the Biggest Loser, like, for some people, some of the contestants, it really transformed their lives in a positive way. But for others, it was really, really not a positive experience. So I don't know. I've never been, I really don't like reality TV. I actively will not watch it because I think it shows people in their worst, but also it's manipulated to show that too. And then I talked about it recently, the studio, with what's his name, Seth, whatever. And
Rogan.
I found it really intense to watch it, like energetically intense. And it got some awards and stuff. Anyway, Lex and I decided to finish it. Mate, that is that is a mind-blowing show. It's not a show you relax to, like everything's like the whole time. But it's a pretty fascinating take on Hollywood. So
I'm
if
getting
you
a
haven't done
sense
it,
that it's like what the bear is to kitchens, right? It's what
yeah,
studio is
yeah.
to the movie industry, what the bear is to kitchens.
Yeah, the last one, they're all completely stoned on magic mushrooms, right? And it's just this intensity around, there's all these people going off in different directions, doing all sorts of crazy stuff. So it's fascinating. It's probably worth a watch. Like we're all trying to just trying to understand different ways of being in the world and existing in the world. And Joe and I both spend a lot of time in right-wing circles in different ways. You're much more central in them than I am, but just to try and, why do people think the way they think? The people who are caught up in the rapture, like, what do they do now? That it didn't happen. Do they just come up with another date? How do people get there? 'Cause my mum's an extremely Catholic person, right? So I talk to her about all sorts of stuff like this. But those people who were so convinced it was going to happen on this date, so what happens next? You know, QAnon was famous. This is going to happen, and then it didn't. I'm like, so why are you guys still following Q when nothing happens that he says is going to happen? You know, so yeah. We'll keep trying to make sense of this world, huh? David, you're on mute. But thanks everyone for checking in.
Okay. Yep.
Joseph didn't come back. I think he got confused and got dropped off or something. But really lovely to listen to what he's doing and the big impact he's made. I think that was amazing. We can all be that person, you know, in our own different ways, you know.
And actually, one of the things that we've always tried to do here is to find guests that can be inspiring that way, or produce, an alternative perspective as well. So if you're a viewer of this and you're thinking, well, yeah, somebody else should be on the show, will you let us know about that as well? Because I think that's what Andrea, who's the brains behind all this, it's the biggest challenge to find someone to bring onto the show as well, who is, first of all, I think has an interesting perspective or is doing something significant, but also would be appropriate, you know, for this audience. So yeah, if you know someone like that, please let us know.
I found a few great people at Impact Week last week in Singapore, so I'm going to follow up. And a young lady in the Philippines who's a chef, and she's doing all this sustainable agriculture and farming with local women. She said she'd come and join us. Young, beautiful, amazing. So yeah. But we're always happy to hear from people. So we will see you all next week. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for commenting. And time for last Friday of the month.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Andrea and Joe.